So I was watching some BookTube and I was checking out Steve Donahue's 10 novels I've reread the most. That was a response to Sean D. Standfast's video. I'll post links to both below. Um, so I'm at work, so I'm not at my library, but I thought, you know, top 10 books that I've read at least 4 times in my life. That's not too hard to come up with off the top of my head. So I do have one book here at work, and that would be Llama's Night by Catherine Kurtz. Have I read this 4 times? No. I've probably read this 8 or 10 times. I love this book. Is it high fiction? No. But is it a fun read? Absolutely. It's that kind of, it's magical, it's historical. It takes place during World War II when the witches of England gathered together to form a cone of power to keep Hitler from invading. So it's a great novel, just a fun read. So yeah, so this is the one book that I had here at work. So that's one down. 9 others. S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. I used to read that every year. I did that probably for 15 years straight. I loved that book. For one thing, I grew up in a small town where it was sort of trapped in the 1950s, maybe early 1960s, up until the late 1980s. So The Outsiders seemed, very current to me. In the same way that, growing up watching Happy Days felt that same way. I mean, we had a soda shop. We had, we were very, very stuck in time. So, so The Outsiders, just, a great tale written by a teenager, and just, really insightful. I really enjoyed that. So that's 2. Let's see. Can I come up with 8 more? Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. That's another book that I have read all of or parts of, since I was in the 6th grade. Used to read certain chapters every year and would frequently do rereads throughout. So, what do you say about Tolkien that hasn't been said a million times, right? So it's very immersive, very poetic, just lovely language. And it's the kind of book that you like to revisit. So, yeah, definitely, that was a perennial favorite of mine. So that's 3. A 4th, Robert E. Howard's Hour of the Dragon. Fantastic book. I have read it probably a dozen times at least. I revisit Conan fiction frequently. So, it definitely is in heavy rotation. I will read it again. I'm planning to do a reread of all of Howard's Conan tales. And, so it's big, it's bold. It's not his best work. It's a little derivative, I think. But, the worst Conan story is still, brilliant fiction. So, that definitely have read it more than 4 times. So, let's see, that's 4 books. What else can I think of that I've read more than 4 times? Well, there's a lot of Stephen King. A lot of Stephen King I've revisited more than once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. I've read The Stand at least 4 times. So there's that. The Stand. It's a big, thick book, you know. What else have we? So that's 5. I'm halfway home. How about Aleister Crowley's Moonchild? I've read that 4 times. Loved it. Very rich language. Very, you know, of its time. I mean, you know, Edwardian. Crowley certainly had a way with words. That was his bread and butter, right? So, Moonchild is a fantastic romp, full of white and black magic and daring do's. It's just, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's got issues. Don't get me wrong. I have no qualms with revisiting that book, and I'm sure I will read it again. That brings me to Dennis Wheatley, and I have read a few of his books multiple times. The most I've read is probably The Devil Rides Out, which I just adore. Again, it is of that time period where I just love that language from that era, that the 20s, 30s. It's just so action packed and so over the top. I mean, Wheatley is just, he's just delicious and what far underread now, which is a shame because he's written a lot of great fiction. So that's 6 books. Can I come up with 4 more? I just mentioned how much I love that time period. Well, I've read The Maltese Falcon 4 times. I've read The Big Sleep 4 times. That's, if you want hard-boiled fiction, I mean, that's just, those are the 2 pinnacles, right? Just brilliant works. You get so lost in the language, particularly in The Maltese Falcon. It's just a delicious read. So that's what, 7 and 8. I only have to come up with 2 more books. How hard is that? I've reread. Let's see. I've read Dragonlance 4 times. Heck, I read it, back to back when it first came out because, it just really captivated me, and it's like, it's a roller coaster, if you like fantasy, it's a very light fantasy, meaning it borders on being young adult. It holds up, but it is definitely a youthful book, and but a lot of fun. Like everyone, I loved Raceland, but I loved Tanis too. I mean, I didn't like the way his story played out. Ultimately, you could say the same about any of them. It was definitely had its Dungeons and Dragons roots right at the fore. So that leaves one solitary book to come up with. One book that I've read 4 times or more. And again, this is all just off the top of my head. If I was in my library, I'd be like picking out, I haven't really touched on very many, classic literature, which, there are books there that I'd read more than 4 times. So, what's the final book How about Le Morte d'Arthur? Right? So that's the fictional tales of King Arthur. 4 times, 8 times, 12 times. Who knows? I mean, that's a book that I picked up frequently. And we're supposed to also name 3 books that aren't quite novels. I mean, maybe Le Morte d'Arthur doesn't really count as a novel either. You know what? Let's call that one of my alternates, and we'll throw in Beowulf, right? The epic poem. It doesn't quite qualify, I guess, by the rules of the game. Read it more than 4 times. I've read it 20 times. And as long as we're doing the alternates, let's go ahead and get that out of the way. I can just, say, all kinds of Robert E. Howard fiction. So let's just pick one of them that is a novella, to be sure. Right? So Beyond the Black River, probably my favorite Conan tale. Really, really, really like that one. It's almost a Western, which is ironic with June on the Range coming up, but I digress. Beyond the Black River, Conan's a scout, on the borderlands, runs afoul of the Picts, good stuff. I mean, just again, delicious language. So that leaves one novel, and that's where I'm getting myself in trouble. So surely, there's something else. So as I think, Umberto Eco's Foucault's Pendulum. Why I didn't name that first, or for that matter, the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. I've read that more than 4 times. Read Foucault's Pendulum more than 4 times. But I said Foucault's Pendulum first, so let's stick with that. Although, if you think about it, Illuminatus trilogy and Foucault's Pendulum are kind of companion pieces. One is humorous and the other is not, right? But they deal with that same kind of conspiracy theory, occult-oriented esoterica, and it's just, Foucault's Pendulum is just a brilliant novel. I used to list it. I used to list Umberto Eco as one of my favorite authors, but I got a problem with that, right? And the problem was that am I an Umberto Eco fan? I don't know, because I can't read Italian, right? So I'm certainly a fan of whoever's translating his books, and I like the ideas that Eco presents, but a fan of his writing per se, that's hard to say, isn't it? But any of the 10 books I mentioned, the 13, 14, whatever that I mentioned, I would recommend all of them, without a doubt. It's weird. Donahue mentioned that, non-readers, think it's crazy. Not only do they think it's crazy that you're reading books that you're not forced to read, due to school or some other obligation, but that you would read a book more than once. I could sit here and name so many books that I've revisited over and over and over again, and put on the spot and off the top of my head. Suddenly now, like, all these other books are, flooding in at me. So, but then that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to address that. I am a big fan of Steve Donahue's channel, and I couldn't let this set. So, yeah, there you go. 10 books that I've read at least 4 times. And I did that off the top of my skull. So, yeah, That was fun. I'll let you get back to what you were doing.